Welcome to Business Talk Sister Gawk. I'm Becca, and today's podcast episode title is What is a Private Equity Fund? And with me today, I have Drew Lendermon, and I am super excited to have him here with me because he knows a lot about this. Thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Becca. It's good to be here.
I am really looking forward to everything about this. So Drew, you have a ton of experience with private equity and tell me what you do. What's your job?
Currently, I am the director of growth for Destination Pet. So there's quite a few aspects to that, and the job has kind of evolved over time. But I've spent a lot of time creating business plans, whether that be for a startup or even just a renovation, basically any kind of big growth CapEx project. And then I take that and put it in front of our investment committee, which is our private equity board, for approval.
Okay, so first, what is Destination Pet?
Destination Pet is a pet care company. It started in June of 2017 with around 5 acquisitions, which I was actually a part of. I was a general manager at the third and fourth acquisition.
Okay.
And they're now over 100 locations as of the last 2 or 3 months.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes, it is split between pet care and vet.
Okay.
But it's basically an approach of holistic pet care and keeping that all under one roof to the best of our ability.
Okay, so before we move on further, there was a buzzword that you used that I didn't know if most of my listeners know, or me, quite honestly. What is a CapEx project?
So capital expenditure, the way I look at this is you're creating value in your business rather than just an expense, which is going to be a liability. So this is the conversation. There's kind of like asset versus liability. If you're, say, in my industry, if you're adding 30 kennels to your boarding capacity, so you have the ability to service more customers, that equipment, assuming it is going to be, number one, a large investment, number two, more of like a long-term investment, as it does not immediately lose its value, then that actually goes into the value of the business. So it's not as simple as saying, oh no, I'm spending, say, $30,000 on kennels. It's like I am, but I am also adding value to my business while increasing my ability to make more revenue.
Well, that is why we're talking today, because right now, this whole series that I've been trying to do is the worth of a business. And so this is a perfect tie into that. And if you missed the previous episodes in this series, how much is the business worth? What is a business valuation, and how to prepare your business for investors? You should go back and listen to those. They're the first 3 episodes right before this one. And yeah, I'm super excited to get into this. So what do private equity funds actually do?
Typically, they are investing in companies. The structure of that can look very different as far as actual involvement in daily operations, things like that. Typically, they're lending money for a fee or profit share or equity in the business. In which case, if a private equity fund invests in equity, they're probably going to want to be involved in some daily operations. That agreement might have some structure to make sure that they have say in decision making, things like that, as opposed to really just be very hands-off investing.
Okay. Private, let me just reiterate what I think it is. There's a group of, somehow a pool of money gets together, and then there's people that use that money to buy equity stake or partial ownership, or maybe even full ownership in other businesses that have value. Yes?
Correct.
Okay.
I also, for simplification, the way I look at the term private equity is it's you're borrowing money from something other than a bank.
Oh, okay.
Which gives them a little bit more flexibility in how they can structure loans.
Interesting. So what kind of people approach private equity, or does private equity funds approach businesses? How does that usually shake up where people get connected?
I think it definitely works both ways. I think more than not, in my experience, it is a individual or individuals putting a solid business plan together, getting everything, kind of getting their ducks in a row and understanding or really just being able to paint the picture of the business they're trying to build and taking that to private equity that is interested in often that industry.
Mm,
And that is part of the way that I think private equity groups try and mitigate risk around their investments is typically they have experience themselves or someone with a lot of experience in that industry so that
mm.
they can actually add resources and growth for that company rather than just capital.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I never knew that. So, what kind of business structure are private equity funds set up as? Are they technically a business or are there specific filings that need to be laid out before starting?
Don't have a ton of experience with actually setting them up. I know that they're typically a partnership agreement. Um,
Okay.
uh, and typically you have like partners investing capital and being very hands off within the fund. And then you
Okay.
have partners that are very hands on with the investments. So it's kind of like the operations or operator of the fund as opposed to just the funding of it.
Okay. So, in my understanding of that, you have some individuals maybe that are pretty wealthy that say, I'm going to put my money into this pool and I'm going to put a certain number of people in charge of investing it on my behalf and making sure that I get a good return on investment.
Correct.
Okay.
It's like if two wealthy individuals say, hey, we really like pet care. We would like to start a pet care fund, but they would still be looking for that operating experience or someone with really great specific industry knowledge to kind of guide the ship a little bit.
Interesting. Okay, so how do private equity funds make money then?
Several ways, either fees, which is like simple as traditional banking is, hey, we'll give you this money and we're going to take payments and here's the additional fee you're going to pay us, and so there's profit there for them. Part of that could be structured as profit share. So a company makes X number of dollars and any X number of dollars in profit, and they might get 2% of that, however the deal is structured.
Hmm.
And then the third and probably biggest is liquidating that asset. So if they have ownership and they decide to sell that company,
Hmm.
then they're looking at the return of where did it start? We invested, say, $100,000. We're exiting it, say, $300,000. Okay, this was great,
Mm-hmm.
depending on time and the calculation that my private equity, the private equity we're answering to uses is called IRR. It's internal rate of return,
Okay.
which it's cool because it actually measures time and money. So you can measure a time frame instead of just with an ROI, you're looking more of, and when I say ROI, return on investment, it's just measuring the money and you can look for like a break even period of, I'll stick to my industry of if I have 5 kennels and they cost this much, how many nights do they need to be full at this price for me to break even, as
Mm.
opposed to I could actually tell you what the percentage of return on that money could be over 5 years, which I think is a really cool tool, especially if you're putting something in front of private equity and you can kind of say it's a 5 year return and that's the period you're measuring. You can really break it down within those 5 years and explain how you're going to get there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when it comes to getting private equity to invest, yes, they're investing in the financial package you're putting in front of them, but they're investing in you and your experience, your ability to talk through where those numbers are coming from and painting that picture. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the better you paint that picture, the more likely you are to find a private equity that's interested in investing.
Yeah, no, and next week we're going to get into this because Drew's going to be back with me on how do private equity funds look for acquisitions specifically. So I'm really excited about getting into the nuts and bolts of that. So what kind of experience and what kind of person typically starts a private equity fund and what previous experiences would be helpful?
Um, Industry, I think looking at an industry that they enjoy. I would always say when it comes to business, if you're thinking about investing, it needs to be something that you are passionate about, that you don't just see an
Mm-hmm.
ability to make money. um, as far as skill set goes, there definitely needs to be some fairly intimate financial knowledge to understand general accounting, how and where these numbers are coming from. If you're going to be looking at it from an investor side,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I would also say looking to build a team, someone who is people oriented. It is very hard to have all the skill sets you would need to drive a private equity fund efficiently, let's say.
Okay. So you need other people to support you in that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And how do private equity funds operate on a day-to-day level? What does that look like?
I think it looks differently depending on the size of the fund and how busy they may be as far as involvement with their investments. In my experience, which is a very large fund and across a very big company, it is really just reviewing presentations put together for capex projects, anything over a certain budget that goes to the board. They review it for approval. So it's mainly pulling very high level information, very high level financial information, along with some backstory, and being able to ask questions surrounding that, and ultimately approving that in our instance, it's typically 24 to 48 hours. So it's typically spent at a very high level and not a ton of time. So again, if you're on the investor side, it's very important that you invest in people that you can trust to deliver things on time and correctly, so that the data that you're getting is accurate.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just gonna try to like give an example of what I think you're talking about. So let's say the private equity fund, and you're in the pet industry. So like you have invested in, say, a doggy daycare, and they say, hey, we want to make this big purchase on buying the lot next door to have more space for the dogs to run around. They're the ones putting together their entire packaging proposal of what it's going to cost, and then they're submitting it to you all at the equity fund because you're maybe a majority stakeholder that needs to weigh in before they go out and spend additional money. Would that be kind of the decisions you're talking about?
Yes. And so I'm actually getting feedback from local teams, putting that package together. My leadership team, whether it be CEO, CFO, presents that to the investment committee, which is our board.
Okay. Yeah. So when you are doing this, like what's the best way to learn about how private equity funds work? What was helpful for you?
I would say experience. I did do some online classes, which were super helpful for me to understand general accounting and some of the financial side. That was definitely not my. I grew up as an operator. I was a general manager. I kind of worked my way up through that ranks. So all of that was scary for me a few years ago, let's say. But it was really just being immersed in it and understanding, demystifying it is what it really was, is learning that there's lots of words for lots of financial things that all actually mean the same thing. So people get lost in
Mm-hmm.
translation and get intimidated. Meanwhile, it's just like the general concepts of understanding where the money's going, where it's coming from. And it's just really getting the big picture down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it kind of, to me, sounds like you have to have a good, strong foundation of numbers, but not so strong that you can't see past them to like the strategy and potential of like what you know is available within the market. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And absolutely. If I'm on the investor side, I want someone who's going to be able to speak to the operations of the business, actually, much more so than the financial side. You're looking
Mm-hmm.
for like some financial understanding, of course. But if they are going to run an efficient business, then it gives me a lot warmer feelings about investing than just really awesome financial knowledge. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in my experience with seeing a ton of acquisitions, I have seen quite a few small business owners that we're getting by on very, very good operations and not a lot of high level business knowledge, and we're still very successful.
Yeah, because they basically knew how to treat their customers well and do it right, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Business is people, and if you start looking from the numbers backwards, it can get
Hmm.
very dangerous. You definitely have to understand why the numbers are the way they are and how to move them in ways that is completely connected to staff and people.
Yeah. So have you seen any like changes in the industry as time has progressed in being within pet care and then also private equity funds?
Um, I have I've definitely seen the industry grow very consistently.
Mm,
Um, when in 2020, I definitely saw, when it comes to my experience with our private equity, we definitely slowed down on things, and I think that was across the board. Is um, People got nervous about what to invest in and when, and we have returned to, let's call it, full swing. So
okay.
it's, back to acquiring, nothing really slowed down, still looking at plenty of projects moving forward. So it seems like it's returned to normal. But my experience has been pretty limited to pet care as well.
Okay. Yeah. So are there any big things in the future that you think could affect how private equity funds operate?
Um, Nothing immediately comes to mind, barring big economic impacts. Would be that would be the first thing, is,
Hmm.
housing market housing market changing, interest rates, things like that, as far as what and how much private equity is willing to invest.
Mm,
We could see some industry shifts with where energy's going and things like that. So that could definitely change where some of that private equity money is growing or going, excuse me. But outside of that, I think that things have pretty much returned to normal from what I've seen.
yeah. Okay. So what resources have you found? Were there any like specific books that you would recommend or videos, newsletters, industry knowledge that's been, hey, you should check these things out because they'll keep you in the loop on what's happening.
Um, yes, I have. So wallstreetprep.com is actually the online courses I took, as far as if you're just trying to build some more foundation when it
Okay.
comes to financial knowledge. It's been super helpful. But I will also say that, experience is the best teacher. So if you can find a mentor that is willing to involve you in some day-to-day stuff. I was lucky enough to have Destination Pet's original CEO kind of take me under his wing and taught me a lot. And he's actually the one who put me through some of these courses. And it was super helpful to be pushed out of my comfort zone into that financial deep water, let's call it. And so that was big for me. As far as websites, that there is one that I do actually keep up with quite often, and it's called trends.com.
Okay.
Uh, it's basically just constantly giving business trends. They rake the internet for data and give you what industries are growing, just general knowledge that I feel like it's great for people to see, because, like I said, if you're ever thinking about starting a business and actually looking for private equity to invest in you, like, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
looking through trends of things, and all of a sudden it's a good spot to put yourself in, where something might click, where you're like, oh, this is a growing industry that I never actually thought that maybe I could find a way to be involved with. And those are kind of like the key things that I feel like is important. Is, I spent a very long time thinking like, oh, what do I want to be doing? Meanwhile, when the knowledge kind of all came together, it was like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. And in order to do that, you kind of have to put yourself in a good situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really helpful information. Thank you for sharing. Well, I do want to know, where can people find you?
My website that I will be moving into consulting, it's mainly pet care, but not pet care specific, will be consultthepack.com.
Okay.
And you can also find me at packpetcare.com. I am starting a pet care consulting and innovations company with 4 business partners. Our first product is a commercial collapsible dog den. It's revolutionary in the industry because it actually clips in and out of the wall on some basic unistrut, so it makes it very easy to move around and kind of like gives your business the ability to flex certain space. So, for example, if you do training in a big space that you would love to have some extra boarding capacity for holidays, it's an easy fix because they fold back down to 8 inches. So you can still use the space during the day, or you can actually clip them off the wall and put them in storage.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm really excited about that. And you showed, or I think one of your business partners showed me a video of that recently, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. So
Yeah,
I'm really excited to share that as well when you guys are ready to get out the door with your new venture.
that's awesome. Yeah, we are very close and very excited.
Yeah. So I'm going to transition now to the gawk portion of this episode, which I am really looking forward to because you are a dog person. And from what I understand, you have worked with thousands of dogs and you have one named Sam. Is that right? That you had met in your pet industry journey?
Yes, Sam was a King Charles, and
Okay.
Sam had a frog that absolutely never left his mouth. He carried it everywhere with him like it was his baby. It was very unique. Again, I've seen thousands of dogs and I've never seen one that attached to something. And it was just an adorable story that I wanted to share.
Yeah. And so with the boarding side of it, you were saying too that like there's like certain animals or certain dogs that like just have different things that they've learned to do or personalities and stuff. What's one interesting one about some dogs that you know?
Yeah, we had a couple Shih Tzus. Their names were Thelma and Louise. And I'll never
That's
forget the
very
first time they came in. Yeah, I know, love it.
old person
Um,
names.
dog names are a whole nother
Yeah.
funny topic.
Hmm.
So the first time they came in, when we would intake clients, we would do an inventory of all their things. So we were typically doing that in the lobby, making sure we had everything what we needed. And I'm going through the bag, and there's a hamster feeder in it. So of course I pull it out and kind of look at the owner, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's how they drink water. We can't always get them to drink water out of a bowl, so we use a hamster feeder." So
Okay.
needless to say, I at what 6:30 in the morning and around 5:30 at night, I watered Thelma and Louise, and and that happened. I couldn't tell you how many times. They became regulars and were actually super sweet dogs. It was just they out of the thousands I've met, that was the only hamster feeder.
Yeah, that's it. I wonder like the training process for that entire thing. Oh,
Yeah, it's funny. We have notes outside of the runs, and that one had all kinds of stuff written on it because that is definitely not one that somebody was used to. It's like use the hamster feeder. It's like see manager.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to get together next week. And if you missed this episode series before this, so far we're on number 4. So go back and listen to the previous 3. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts and give it a review. And I'll see you next week.